Hello, I'm Cameron Roberts. I'm the Digital and Community Editor here at Mash Media. Today, I want to find out a little bit more about how technologies such as blockchain and non-fungible tokens, or NFTs, are changing the events industry. To that end, I'm joined by Monique Morrow, who is a global technology leader specializing in distributed ledger technology, blockchain, and emerging technologies. Currently, she operates as the Senior Distinguished Architect for Emerging Technologies at Syniverse Technologies, and she is also the President and Co-founder of the Humanized Internet. Additionally, she has been listed as one of Forbes magazine's top 50 women globally in technology. She is the 2020 winner of the Women Tech Network Global Technology Leadership Award. She holds 15 patents and has co-authored several books. It's great to have you, Monique. How are you today?
It's a pleasure to be here, Cameron, and I'm doing very well, thank you. In spite of the heat, as we spoke earlier.
Indeed, yes, we are having a little bit of a heat wave over here in the UK at the moment. So we obviously went through a little bit of your background there, a very strong tech background. I guess to kick things off a little more about you, what's your kind of interest and your touch point in the events industry?
So I think, there's a great intersectionality here because I do participate in events as being a speaker, for example. You can imagine many conferences in itself. And so one of the observations I have is that the events industry itself is ripe for more opportunities that could be enabled by technologies such as blockchain, or distributed ledger technology, and fueled by something that's quite emerging, which is what you stated before, which is NFTs, or non-fungible tokens. So being a participant, being an active participant, I think this is something that, rather than, you want to be able to actually gamify the experience, so to say. Not that it's not done, but even more emotionally, I would say. Yeah. And as well as what makes business sense for the industry as a whole.
Indeed, and I think we've certainly seen over the pandemic with digital platforms and digital events that there is definitely a crossover there between kind of large tech companies and existing events companies. Mm-hmm. What's kind of kicked off this conversation for me today is that LinkedIn has actually invested in a events platform called Hopin. Yes. It's actually quite a large investment, so that kind of leads on very well into how do these kind of very big tech companies traditionally associate with events companies? What's the crossover there? And for kind of maybe slightly more traditional event organizers, how do they keep pace with the really frenetic pace of tech development?
Well, I think it's interesting, having participated just this past week in a Hopin event on women in tech, which was a global conference. For me, it was an interesting experience with Hopin in itself. The thing that I think it's fascinating that you see is probably fueled by what's happening in the COVID-19 crisis, that you had to look at how you deal with these kind of conferences virtually and somewhat in a hybrid way. So, you're in a conference, you have 550 plus speakers, and it's global. So I think it's fascinating that LinkedIn has done that, and to their credit. So they're moving in this space. They're moving in this conference, and have been for some time, space from a technology-enabled perspective. And so, I think it's something that is we should be paying, or the people who are actually, or the organizations who are actually in the events planning groups should be paying close attention to that. However, I will say nothing is, it's very fine when you're physically in a conference. I mean, that's always great because that's where value of networking happens, face to face, or going off for coffee, or going off for a meeting together. There's there's nothing more valuable than face to face meetings. But we have to look at how we respond to these pivots. And to LinkedIn's credit, they did, and they have been. And so the question now is, how are the event planners going to respond, right? So, the space probably better than I do, but I think it's more that either you get on the train, and I hate to use that term, but the train has already taken off, mm-hmm. Right? So it's this traditionalist view of I get a fee, I plan the menus, or I plan who the speakers are. I think there's the event planning industry is ripe, so ripe for more business opportunities for itself.
Certainly, I think I think tech is certainly an emerging avenue for any events company, right? That's not a particularly wild thing to say, I wouldn't say. Shifting gears slightly, obviously in kind of the intro piece there, I mentioned that the two kind of techs I want to get your thoughts on are blockchain and NFTs. So I think a really good baseline for us, and I'm sure you get asked this question all the time, is as simply as possible, could you just explain what blockchain and NFTs are?
Yeah, sure. So in simplest form, a blockchain is a ledger. You can have it as a ledger as you use, for example, a database. However, it's connected together by blocks. So that's blockchain in itself, and what happens in the background is some puzzles that are being solved, etc. But it's a ledger for storage, and it has certain characteristics. It's immutable, meaning to say that it's a single source of truth. And so what you have in that is a level of transparency. You can just say, break a bunch of glass together and you put it together, and that's there's your single source of truth. So why would you be using, a ledger-based technology versus, let's say, something like a database, a traditional database? And the reasons are, you can use a traditional database, but the reasons are if you are interfacing with organizations you don't know, you don't trust, or maybe even if you do, they're elsewhere, or whatever. There is something to be said about using a blockchain. Typically, it's because you don't trust or you don't know the other sets of organizations. The immutability, the fact that you can't change what goes on the blockchain is very important, because you don't want to put your personal data on the blockchain, right? So you have to be careful of garbage in, garbage out. So that's one thing. And usually people associate Bitcoin with blockchain, but Bitcoin uses blockchain. It's the underpinning. I don't want to say so much insofar as it's really underpinning technology upon which Bitcoin operates, but blockchain is used for other reasons, and that is third party relationships. So that's really it is in the simplest form. It's a database, distributed, uses blocks. That's simple.
Makes sense.
Makes sense. Non-fungible tokens versus fungible tokens. When something is fungible, you can exchange. It's cash. Go to the pub, you pay what? Pay pounds or whatever, right? That's cash. That's fungible. You can fill it. Non-fungible, you can't. So when something is non-fungible and you have it tokenized, it's a level of saying, okay, it's a particular association. It's a physical asset that has now become digitized, and it has value. You can't exchange it for pounds, but you can actually use to invest in it, for example. That becomes something that's non-fungible. And an example that we're seeing now is in the sports industry. Basketball players, are very much involved in this in terms of, you can have a shared pictorial of a basketball player that you've invested in as a non-fungible token.
Mm-hmm.
It's something, and artists too are examples of using NFTs.
Right.
Is it clear? If it's not clear, you got to say.
It's much clearer for me, at least, and I think it's good to have kind of that baseline to jump off of, really, because now that we have a bit better of an idea of what blockchain and NFTs actually are, and why they're being used, I think it would be good to have a bit more context of what are the practical uses of those technologies in an event space. And I know it's quite easy to get into quite pie in the sky ideas of, in 20 years we can do this, but I guess today, what are the applications?
No, you can actually do quite a bit. I mean, and also live events versus static events, etc. Well, one big application is in ticketing. So you have examples like Eventbrite that uses ticketing, but think about it in terms of being able to have a ticket that becomes an NFT, and one of the reasons here, and then of course you're using blockchain underneath. Remember, I said it's immutable, right? So one of the problems with ticketing is that you have scalping that occurs. So now you have transparency in that ticketing process, and I think that's a great example of its use. Another example, being attendee, as we talked about in the beginning of conferences, I have a whole collection in the other room of conference badges, is actually being able to use these badges as an NFT, you know, for example, or a non-fungible token. And so I think that's kind of a really interesting space. Why do we collect badges? Well, because that is emotional, and then you're building that community. So for that is to be able to say, hey, look, here are the picture of my badges. This is what this is the badges I got. And by the way, I want this. You know, this. Then you can, and the event industry can start to create an NFT around it, a non-fungible token around it. I think the other process to it is perhaps thinking about, and with that, you can actually gamify these badges. Right, so many badges in an event, you may have access to a speaker that becomes tokenized, right, under an NFT. So that becomes remember, it's all about that experience, right? And so I think the bigger component, you know, I've actually heard about a few broadcasts, but I think a bigger opportunity moving forward is that the people who work in this particular industry in terms of planning and events can also think about royalty fees, you know, having royalty for each event, you know, and that lives on forever and ever, whether it's something that is on video, whether it's, you know, there's an image, right, to it. And so that's something that could possibly be used as an NFT in itself. So there's quite a bit. So ticket, swag. And swag is really cool. I mean, you know, that thing is, I mean, I've had a level of that where it was said, you know, when you want to trade your swag, but here's a piece of a swag could actually be something that you can run on an NFT in itself, you know, have it as an NFT. I was at XYZ event, you know, this event, I had pieces of swag, but you know what, I want to, you know, you have a picture of it, I want to tokenize it, I want to run it, and so certainly the event planners can take advantage of that. So again, tickets, badges, swag, and then you start to gamify the experience. And by the way, long term, you can actually think about, you know, perhaps royalty with using NFTs. That's a long term kind of way to think about it. But yeah. Those are big opportunities. Just you have low hanging fruit, for God's sakes, in this space.
Yeah, and I think that there's you know, just those. I think the ticketing makes so much sense, but I like that there's almost a really practical application. But talking about kind of the emotion of being at an event and having, you know, kind of that badge, I like that there's kind of two different elements to it. I mean, you talked a little bit about gamification there, and that does kind of lead me quite well onto my final question, which is you're speaking at IBTM Wired, which is taking place on the 28th of June until the 1st of July. I believe you're speaking about kind of blockchain and NFTs and how that can gamify the events experience. You know, what are the details you're going to go in, and why is it an event that you think events professionals should be attending?
I mean, we just took a snippet of the conversation that we're going to have, right, that I'm going to have on there. And so that gamifying the event using NFTs and you know, fueled by blockchain itself, or using the ledger process itself, is exactly an opportunity for the event planners and their attendees to, you know, participate in the conversation. And that's a must-see and must-hear opportunity, because the opportunities are here. And as I said before, you know, if you don't get, you know, engage actively, and there is so much low-hanging fruit here, the question to ask is, do you want to be left behind? To the beginning of the conversation, right? To the beginning of the conversation. Yeah. And that's what I would be speaking about.
Certainly, I don't think anyone wants to get left behind in this space. For anyone who's watching, IBTM Wired, as I said, takes place on the 28th of June until the 1st of July, and you can find out more information at ibtmwired.com. That is actually all the time myself and Monique have today. Thank you very much for joining me, Monique. It's been absolutely wonderful speaking to you. For more from Mash Media, follow any of our publications on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I will see you next time.